right, so I'll also keep an eye on the chat box on my other screen. So if you see me looking that side, don't worry. And we're going to cover, just going to hide this control. Right. So chapter 7, knowledge of the absolute. I'm just going to cover some prayers which are in the beginning of the Bhagavad-Gita. Om Agyanatmi Vandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasme Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swaha Padantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sadevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate
Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, knowledge of the absolute. There are 30 verses in this chapter. And I'm sure you covered in the first week that Bhagavad Gita is structured into is 18 chapters, 666. 1 to 6 is focusing on karma yoga. Krishna also introduced all different types of yoga in this first 6 chapters. Even chapter 2 was contents of the Gita summarized. Then in from chapter 7 to 12, which we're going to cover today, is bhakti. Then 13 to 18, jnana yoga, which we'll cover next week. Now, bhakti yoga is in the center because it's the most important. Just like in a sandwich, you got top and a bottom part, and the most important, the filling, is in the center. Or like in an entourage, the king, the queen, the president, when they go, they have an entourage in front and an entourage at the back to protect them. Most important personalities in the middle. So Krishna places bhakti yoga protected from karma and jnana on the ends, and it's a secret, it's confidential, and therefore Krishna puts it in the middle to protect it. So chapter 7, in essence, Lord Krishna is the supreme truth, the supreme cause and sustaining force of everything, both material and spiritual. Advanced souls surrender unto him in devotion, whereas impious souls divert their minds to other objects of worship. So the link between 6 and 7, Lord Krishna ended chapter 6 with this beautiful verse, right, describing topmost yogi. Yogi namapi sarvesham madgate antaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yuktatamo mata. Of all the yogis, the one with great faith who abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me, is the most intimately united with me in yoga, and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. So Krishna really gives a very clear definition and understanding of a yogi that really has great faith. That faith is key to accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this now links into chapter 7, where Krishna is going to tell us how to think of him. And Krishna, it's interesting that of all the chapters from chapter 2, 3, 4, where Arjuna asks so many questions, and each chapter generally begins with Arjuna asking a question and Krishna answers. This chapter and the chapters going forward, Krishna doesn't wait for a question because it's Bhakti Yoga. Krishna is so excited to share knowledge about himself because he knows that this knowledge about himself is going to strengthen the loving devotional bonds between him and the living entity. So Krishna is so excited. He immediately starts off. There are 6 sections of this chapter, which we're going to cover, and I'll cover briefly some of the important aspects of this, of each of the chapters. So verses 7 to 7.1 to 3. Right. So verses 1 to 3, Krishna is going to talk about knowing him in full by hearing about him. Very wonderful verse. Let's see if you can repeat at home as I chant one line. You just repeat on your own. You don't need to unmute. Maya Ashakta Manapartha
Maya Astaka Manapartha
Yogam Yunjam Mad Ashraya
Yogam Yunjan Mad Astraya
Asamshayam Samangramam
Asam Samyam Samagramam
Yatagnasche Sitachrunu.
Yata Yasnasti Tachturna.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, now hear, O Partha, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. So this is a very, very important point. Krishna is saying to Arjuna, hear from me. You can only know about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You can only know about God. You can only know about someone when they themselves tell you about. Otherwise, you can speculate, but the speculation will not really give you true knowledge about any personality, especially the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then here Krishna is also making a very important point that Ashakta Mana, Maya Ashakta Mana, one's mind must be attached to him. And in this way, if you know him, free from doubt, this is the perfection. So then Krishna begins to explain after he establishes that you need to know him, and it takes many, many lifetimes to know him. But once you know him, then that is the perfection, and Krishna is going to unfold what happens to someone who surrenders to him, who knows about him. From B to F, Krishna is now going to share knowledge about him, because he said, Tachrinu, hear from me. So 7 to, from 4 to 12, knowing Krishna as the source of both material and spiritual energies, Krishna is going to start speaking about himself. So he starts off, text 4, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego. Altogether, these constitutes my separated material energies. So this is one category of energies Krishna is describing. Besides these, O mighty armed Arjuna, there is another superior energy of mine, which comprises of the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. So here Krishna is describing 2 energies. We know that even science, they say everything is energy. So Krishna is establishing, yes, everything is energy, and there are 2 categories of these energies. There's the material energy and there's the spiritual energy. Material energy, Krishna describes this 8. The mind, intelligence, and false ego is the subtle energy. Earth, water, fire, air, and ether is the gross material energy. But these 8 energies are Krishna's separated. They are material. Material means they don't have life on their own. Okay? Whereas the next category of energy, Krishna says, is superior. That's the living entities, you and I, the spiritual beings. We are spiritual energy. And Krishna says that the spiritual energy and the material energy are all his energies. The soul, we, the living entities, are exploiting matter. That's how we make matter move. That's how we, you could say, transform matter. We cannot destroy matter, but we can transform matter from one form to another. So this is how the living entities are described in this section. Then in this section also Krishna gives another beautiful verse. Let's repeat this. Mata parataram nanyat.
Mata Parataram Nanyat
Kinchit asti dhananjaya.
Kishtit Asti Dhananjana
Mai sarvam idam proktam.
Mai Sarvam Idam Proktam
Shutre manigana iva.
Sute Manigana Iva.
O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. So Krishna boldly declares there is no truth superior to him. And that's a bold statement. And you find when you study all the Vedas, no one makes a statement as bold as Krishna makes in many places in Bhagavad Gita. And here's one place where Krishna is saying there's no truth superior to him. And then Krishna says, just like a necklace, when you see a pearl necklace, you can only notice the pearls, but you don't notice the string that's holding the pearls together. Similarly, you notice creation, you notice so many aspects and features of this creation, but you don't notice Krishna, who's like the thread that's holding everything. So it's a wonderful analogy Krishna uses, Shutremani Ganaiva. We can understand that everything is maintained, everything is supported by the Supreme Lord Krishna and his features, his expansions. In this chapter, Krishna also, in the purports, Prabhupada describes the three Vishnus that are there: Mahavishnu, Garbhodakasai Vishnu, and Kshirodakasai Vishnus. These are the three Purusha avatars. And they are Krishna's expansions to maintain, create this creation and maintain and support this creation. In text 8, Krishna describes that he's the essence and cause of everything. And he gives different examples, like I'm the taste of water, the light and sun, the light of the sun and moon comes from me. I'm the Vedic mantra Om. I'm the sound of ether. I'm the ability in man. So he's giving many aspects within this material creation that we can contemplate. And when we contemplate like ability of man, every ability that people have, it's actually coming from Krishna. So in this way, we can actually think of Krishna in many ways just by these different statements. And Krishna, in even 10th chapter, Krishna will give more of these different statements that I am these different aspects. Now, he's not saying that he is these things, but his energies are manifested, just like the taste of water. Krishna's energies are manifested in there, but just like the sun and the sun rays, you can't separate them. You can't separate the sun ray from the sun. Similarly, you can't separate Krishna's energy from Krishna. Yet they are one and different. The sun ray is different in potency compared to the sun. So there is a difference. Similarly, all these energies of Krishna are different. They are Krishna's energies. Krishna is a source, and these energies, these features, these characteristics manifest in creation, which are part and parcel of him. Then in section C, the three modes are controlled by Krishna, therefore surrender. Arjuna asks a question to Krishna that if you're pervading everything and all your energies are everywhere, and you say you're the supreme, then how is it that people don't surrender to you? And Krishna says it's because of these three modes of material nature. So from 13 to 14, Krishna describes these three modes of material nature. And this subject of the three modes in the first 6 chapters, Krishna also told Arjuna, Trey Gunya Vishaya Veda, rise above the three modes. This is what the Vedas are teaching. So these three modes, they binding all living entities. These are the three gunas. Guna means ropes, they bind. And we find that this creation is basically under the domination, the control of these three modes. The mode of tamas is managed and controlled by Lord Shiva. The mode of rajas, passion, is managed by Brahma. And the mode of sattva, goodness, is managed by Vishnu. These are the presiding deities, the deities that manage these modes. And every living entity and every aspect of this creation, no matter what it is, whether it's colors, whether it's creativity, whether it's activities, the jobs you take, every aspect, even scriptures, the Puranas are divided into these three modes as well, plus the mode of pure goodness, Shuddha Sattva. So if you look at all our activities, let's say someone, they like to open up, like you'll see in this picture, somebody likes to open up a vegetable shop. So the reason they like to open up a vegetable shop, they inclined in that direction, is because of the mode of goodness. Somebody may want to open up a butcher because of the mode of ignorance, right? Even the food that you select is due to these modes. So the modes govern our character, our activities, our mindset. And Krishna is encouraging us that we have to recognize that, and we have to try to come to the mode of goodness. Why? Sattva sanjayata gnanam. By the mode of goodness, you get knowledge. And especially knowledge about the soul. But Sudasattva, pure goodness, is when Krishna himself, through the disciplic chain, in a descending way, gives us knowledge about himself. Right? You cannot get knowledge, transcendental knowledge about Krishna through the mode of goodness. Through the mode of goodness, you can get knowledge of spirit. You can understand matter and spirit. But to understand the Supreme Lord, he needs to share knowledge about himself. Therefore, in this chapter, Krishna is giving knowledge about himself and the energies that he has. In text 14, a very wonderful verse. So everyone that's bound by by the three modes, which are ropes which bind us, how can we escape these modes, these ropes? Krishna says, let's repeat, Devi Yesa Gunamayi,
Devi Gunamayi,
Mama Maya Duratyaya,
Mama Maya Durataya,
Mam Eva Ye Prapadyante,
Mama Eva Ye Prapadyante,
Mayam Etam Tarantite.
Mayam Etam Tarantite.
This divine energy of mind, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. Krishna says, Duratya, it's difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Right? So Duratya, this word Duratya comes from Durgam, which has its root in Durga. The word Durga, it's the name of Parvati, Lord Shiva's consort. She's in charge of this material creation. She's called Durga. And she controls this material creation as the warden. This material creation is a prison house, and she's Durga. She keeps all the living entities bound up by the three modes of material nature. And to cross over her is impossible. It's insurmountable. But when you surrender to the Supreme Lord, who's like the king, the king is never in the prison. The king is always outside the prison. Right? Durga is the prison warden. She's not bound, but she's the warden. She's serving Krishna. And the king, if you surrender to the king, automatically you can escape or you can come out of prison. So this is how Krishna is explaining. Those who surrender, they can easily cross beyond. Then 15 to 19, now Krishna describes those who are pious and those who are impious. Those who are pious, there are four categories that surrender to Krishna. And those who are impious, the four categories impious that don't surrender to Krishna. So now the Lord is describing those that do surrender and those that don't surrender. So he gives in text 17, Krishna gives four kinds of people that come to him, that approach him, that surrender to him. Now, here Krishna is describing four types of people that surrender. So one is the distressed. Those who are in distress, they approach. Let's say, for example, somebody is ill, somebody has an illness, sick, they have a chronic illness. So they come to the temple. My Lord, please, I got cancer. Can you please help me remove my cancer? So they're coming, distress. And Krishna says, very good. If you have a problem, then it's good that you're coming to him. They're in the category of distress. Then there are those who desire wealth. They want money. So if you go to Krishna, you go to the temple, you pray for Krishna, please give me money, wealth. Krishna says, very good. They are coming to him. Very good. Then there are those who are inquisitive. They're curious. They want to know. So they also come to Krishna. And Krishna says, very good. And then there's the Jnani who actually seeks knowledge. They want knowledge. Right? That's also very good. Now, of these four types of pious souls that come to surrender to Krishna, Krishna says, who's the best? The Jnani. That person who's actually cultivating knowledge. That person who's trying to educate themselves about the Supreme Lord. Why? Because if you're distressed, so let's say you have cancer. You come to Krishna. My Lord, please, I got cancer. I got so many things to do. Please help me remove my cancer. So Krishna said, okay, I remove your cancer. And after a few weeks, your cancer is gone. Now what you're going to do? You're going to forget Krishna. You're not going to visit the temple, and off you go. And you will continue with your activities until you get your next distress, next disease. Then you come back to Krishna. Oh, Krishna, now I got this disease. So therefore, Krishna says that person is not, he's pious, but he's not the best. Same thing with that person who wants wealth. They come, you want wealth, Krishna gives you, then you go. Same thing with somebody who's inquisitive. They don't stay, but the Jnani, the one who is knowledge, he's the best. Why? Because he knows that without Krishna, my life is empty. Without Krishna, I will never be perfectly happy. So therefore, someone who has knowledge, he will cultivate a loving relationship with the Supreme Lord. Now, those who are distressed, who are in seeking wealth and inquisitive, Krishna says they're pious. It's wonderful that they're coming to him. But when they come to him, they must quickly cultivate knowledge. So the distress, seeking wealth and inquisitiveness brings one to spiritual life. And if one gets the knowledge of Bhagavad-Gita, then one begins to understand, why am I distressed? Why am I lacking knowledge? Why am I lacking wealth? It's because I'm separated from Krishna. Krishna is the supreme wealth. All spiritual and material worlds come from him. So therefore, if everything comes from him, how can I have any lack? He's the supreme father. So in this way, the Jnani surrenders to Krishna in devotion. And then Krishna also explains the 4 types of souls that don't surrender. The Naradama, the atheistic, etc. So you can read the different souls that don't surrender to Krishna. Then in texts from sections 20 to 25, in this section now, Krishna goes to describe others that don't surrender to him. So we had the 4 pious, 4 impious, and then these categories of souls that don't surrender. And who are these? Those who surrender to the demigods and those who are impersonalists. Now, Krishna describes in these verses that, and he gives his own, Krishna gives his opinion, he's the Supreme Lord. He says those who are not so intelligent, Alpamedasa, those who are not so intelligent, they surrender to the demigods. And Krishna does not encourage that. Why? Because Krishna says, if you surrender to the demigods, then you go to the planets of the demigods. That's the first point. Second point, Krishna says that if you want something, then you come to him. I'll give you an example. So let's see, I can see, I'm just going to. So if you have a camera, switch on your camera. We have a quick exercise. So if you got your camera on, so you can switch on your camera. Okay. And if you don't want to switch on, no problem. But if you want to switch on, I'm going to do a very simple exercise. Quick exercise, no, not too difficult. So 1 minute exercise. Okay, only Mukund's brave. Right, got him up, very good. Okay, so we got 2 of y'all. The rest of y'all, I want you to do it at home. Okay, Ajay, very good. Now, I want you, very simple, okay, I want you all to touch your right cheek. Touch your right cheek with your hand. Very good. Now, I want you to see how everyone is touching, right? That's how they touch it. Now, how come y'all didn't do this? You just went like this. You didn't go like this. That's also an alternative, right? You just went like this. So you touched your right cheek, right? But you didn't go indirectly like that. You went direct. Krishna says that's what you need to do. Go direct to the source. Don't go indirectly through the demigods. The Vedas do describe a process of going through the demigods because they are suppliers. There's 330 million demigods. We know the 5 principal demigods, but there's 330 million. And they're all in charge of different parts of this world. So for example, your eyelids, your movement of hands, they're all they are controlled by different demigods. The elements of this material world are controlled by demigods. So Krishna says, and they have their purpose, but Krishna says, if you want something, just go directly to the source. Like in the supermarket, if you know the owner of the supermarket, you can get products without paying, or you can get it at a great discount. But if you go to the teller cannot just give you a discount. Oh, I like you. You're wearing a nice outfit. I'll give you a discount. No, teller can't give you a discount. The teller will give you exactly what the price is. So the demigods, they can't make a decision on their own. If you ask for something and you do the respective prayers, they have to give you what you ask for. The challenge is many people ask for material things. And Krishna says, if you ask for material things, you get bound in the cycle of birth and death. That's the first picture that shows. And that's not intelligent, because we are condemned by birth and death. And it's not part of the soul to be condemned, to be influenced by death. Whereas if you surrender to Krishna, Krishna says you go to him. And if you want material things, it's better to pray to Krishna than to the demigods. So Krishna is encouraging. Now, there's 330 million demigods. How do we please all of them? The example is given, just like there's the tree. And all the leaves on the tree, they like the different demigods. Now, if you want to nourish all the leaves, to pour water on all the leaves is not practical, not the right process. You simply pour water on the root and all the leaves gets nourished. Similarly, you pour water on the root, which is Krishna, and all the demigods are pleased. This is how Krishna is encouraging the living entity to surrender. There's a question. You mentioned about surrender. What does it mean to surrender? How can one surrender to Krishna? Very good. There's 6 characteristics of surrender. For example, accepting things favorable and rejecting things unfavorable. It's called Sharanagati. Accepting Krishna as one's friend, being meek and humble, accepting Krishna as one's protector. So like that, 6 characteristics. Now surrender means I am going to follow Krishna's advice, Krishna's instructions. I'm going to listen to Krishna. Like a child accepting the father. The child is surrendered to the father. So the child will follow the instructions, the guidance. And when the child is under the protection of, when the child surrenders to the father will protect the child. The first sign of surrender is chanting the holy names of Krishna. It's the sign. It's like telling Krishna, when you're in a war, right? There's a battle. Then you raise your flag. If you win, you're losing. You want to give up. So you raise your flag. I give up. I'm surrendering. That white flag is saying, I surrender. So when your enemy comes, you can't take a gun and fight. Nope. When you raise a white flag, it means that I'm not fighting anymore. I will surrender to your wish. So when you pick up a white flag to Krishna, which is the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, you're telling Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, please forgive me for being separated from you. I surrender to your wish. I surrender to your instructions. So that is, please engage me. Please take me out of this material world and engage me in your service. So that is surrender. It's a gradual process of surrendering 1%, 2%, 3%, 10%, 20%, 50%, 100%. When you surrender 100%, you basically become a pure devotee, go back to the spiritual world. So life is basically meant for surrendering step by step. Our mind, body, and words, as Krishna explains, that yogi who fully surrenders. Now, another aspect, or another person that don't surrender to Krishna, the impersonalists. Krishna also describes about the impersonalists in many places in the Bhagavad-Gita. Krishna says those who are demigod worshippers, they have little intelligence. But those who are impersonalists, Krishna says they have no intelligence. Why? Because to consider the Supreme to be impersonal is not very intelligent. Just consider, if you have form, how can God, the supreme, the source of you, not have form? It's like saying there's heat, the sun rays. When sun rays fall on your hand, you feel the heat. So it's like saying, oh, the sun rays are falling on my hand, I can feel the heat. That means there is no heat in the sun. Nope. If there is heat in the source of the sun, the rays that coming from the sun, there has to be heat. In fact, more heat in the sun. Similarly, if everything within our purview has form, all matter has form, we have form, body is our form. If we have form, then how is it that the source does not have form? So the source that does have form, just like in Christianity, it's explained, man is made in the image of God. If man is made in the image of God, and this is man's image, two-arm form, then that means God is also two-arm form. Right? But his form is not material. His form is completely spiritual. His body is totally spiritual. We have a material body, but we also have a spiritual form as the spirit soul. So the impersonalists, when they accept Krishna as impersonal, they merge into the Brahman effulgence. They become part. The Brahman effulgence is actually Krishna's effulgence emanating from his body, and they're made out of small, tiny spirit souls. So anyone who meditates on the impersonal feature of God, it's a process. And when they meditate on the impersonal feature, Krishna fulfills their desire. And he allows them to come, you could say, in a merge into the Brahman effulgence. They become part of the effulgence, but they don't lose their identity. They're like one particle in the Brahman effulgence. After some time, they become agitated and they fall down back into the material world as raindrops, and then back into the earth, into the grains, they're eaten, and then they come back into the cycle. Krishna also makes it very clear in terms of the demigod worshippers. Krishna says that those who want to worship demigods, he gives them the faith in relation to that specific deity. So even he is trying to help the living entities fulfill. Like a father, he fulfills the desires of his children. So Krishna also, he wants to try to fulfill the desires. Okay, you want to enjoy? Okay, I'll give you facility. Or you want to worship demigods? I'll give you facility. You want me to be impersonal? I'll fulfill your desire. But ultimately, in these middle 6 chapters, Krishna is really revealing what he wants. And we will talk about that when we come to chapter 9. Krishna also is very clearly is going to tell us how to surrender, what we should do when we recognize him as the Supreme Personality of God. Then this last section, 26 to 30, Krishna then talks about the bewilderment of the living entity and freedom through knowledge. So Krishna says in text 27, he talks about how people become bound. What binds you, right? What causes bondage? And bondage causes pain and suffering. So what causes bondage? Krishna says, O Skiyana Bharata, O conqueror, for all living entities are born of delusion, bewildered by the duality arising from desire and hate. And Gautama Buddha, he also makes this point. There is no fire like passion. There is no chains like hate. Illusion is a net and desire is a rushing river. Exactly as Lord Krishna is describing. The living entities are born into delusion, born into illusion. And they are bewildered by the fire of passion, desire, and the chains of hate. And this attachment and repulsion, desire and hate, I want, I don't want. I like, I don't like. These two dualities, they bind the living entity. And as soon as a living entity starts to desire like this, they become bound. And when they become bound, they are controlled by the material modes of material nature and suffer birth, death, disease, and old age. And repetition of birth, death, disease, and old age. So Lord Krishna is describing that actually we should surrender to him. And then at last he concludes, intelligent persons who are endeavoring for liberation from old age and death take refuge in me in devotional service. They are actually Brahman because they entirely know everything about transcendental activities. So it's very intelligent. Krishna is saying, who are those who are intelligent? They are the ones who are endeavoring for liberation, for mukti. And what is real mukti? Surrendering. In fact, scripture describes real mukti means to recognize that you are a spiritual being, part and parcel of God, an eternal servant of God. When you recognize that, that's real mukti. And then you surrender in devotion to the Lord. And the Lord concludes, those in full consciousness of me, who know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of material manifestation, of the demigods, and of all methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even at the time of death. So when you know Krishna as he is, as he's describing, and here Krishna, the Bhagavad Gita is the essence of the Vedas. The Vedas in its totality is 1 billion verses. Over time, those different verses have been lost, but we have many sections and parts of it. 5,000 years ago, the Bhagavad Gita was lost. And Krishna, we heard in chapter 4, Krishna says, Evam parampara praptam imam rajasaya vidu. Krishna is speaking Bhagavad Gita again to Arjuna, is giving the knowledge again. And this is how we have received this knowledge in disciplic succession. Now, you'll find that in many sections of the Vedas, many different scriptures, Srimad Bhagavatam, Brahma Samhita, so many of these scriptures, there are so many verses that establish Krishna's to Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's the source of all materials and spiritual worlds. Everything emanates from him. So Krishna is saying, one who knows him in full consciousness, that this is Krishna's position. Naturally, what you're going to do? You're going to surrender. Just like a child. Let's say a child is separated when the child is born due to some, unfortunate, let's say a natural catastrophe. The child and the parents are separated, and the child grows up. But somehow or other, somebody knows that this child belongs to these parents, and then they bring the child back to the parents. Naturally, the child who was separated from his parents, when he recognizes his two parents, he's going to surrender. He's going to come back to that relationship. So similarly, when we recognize Krishna and his true position, then naturally the consequence is we surrender. And then Krishna talks about his relation with the material creation, the demigods, sacrifice, and yes, those are the other, and it's obviously in terms of death. So he's going to link this now to the next chapter, which is chapter 8, where Krishna is going to start, and Arjuna is going to start talking about the time of death. So tomorrow we're going to cover chapter 8, which is going to focus specifically about what happens at the time of death, and how does the living entity who's bound by this hate, desire and hate, how does he get bound, and how does he get another material body? In chapter 2, we heard about the soul, and that the soul, the soul will grow in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, and then at the time of death, he goes into another body. So what allows that transition to happen, we're going to cover tomorrow. And that brings us to the end of this chapter 7, knowledge of the absolute, where Krishna is very excited to speak about him, and he introduces to Arjuna, please hear for me, touch Srinu, and then Krishna talks about the material energies that all manifest from him. He's the source of everything. Whatever brilliance, whatever wonderful potencies, whatever abilities, whatever you see in this creation, Krishna says it is his energies. And therefore, when you see the sun, you can understand that's coming from Krishna. That's called Krishna consciousness, becoming conscious of Krishna. When you see a powerful athletes, when you see nature in its, like, for example, if you see a shark, right, its power, you see a lion, all these powerful energies, they're all coming from the Supreme Lord. Krishna says, it is my energies. And when you remember that, that is called Krishna consciousness. Then Krishna talks about those who are pious, they surrender. 4 types of pious that surrender. Those who are don't surrender, the impious, they both, especially the pious people, Krishna says they're very dear to me. But those who are jnanis, those who are seeking knowledge about me, those who are striving to know me more and more, Krishna says they are non-different from me. So those who are pious are dear, but those who seek knowledge about God, they're actually non-different from Krishna. Krishna takes them as his own. And then Krishna talks about the modes of material nature that binds us, and we need to surrender to him to become free. And finally, Krishna concludes by saying that if you're fully conscious of him, then even at a time of death, you will remember him, and your life will be successful. Thank you. Anyone has any questions or comments?
Prabhu, there's only one question. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for an excellent lecture. There's no other comments than that.
All right, good. So it's really challenging to give a synopsis of Bhagavad-Gita because there's so many wonderful verses.
For sure.
And we encourage you. You can go online. There's, I can share a link. If you go online, you can get the Bhagavad-Gita Veda-base. You can go to the Veda-base. You can get the chapters. You can go click on Bhagavad-Gita, go to the verses, read the English. You don't need, if you can't read the Sanskrit, no problem, but you can read the English. And even for tomorrow, you can prepare, go through the 8 chapters, try to read the 8th chapter of Bhagavad-Gita in English. And if you have any questions, then tomorrow we can cover those questions that you have. So this is the 8th chapter. This is the translation, which has 28 verses. Today we covered 30 verses. Tomorrow we're going to cover 28, or at least chapter 8, 20 verses. So just read through that. Very, very wonderful. Tomorrow we're going to speak about death. And I'm going to I'll cover the verses, but I'll also possibly share a little more about this subject about dying. Because life, if you really want to live life, you should know how to die nicely. And that we're going to cover tomorrow. The art of dying. Thank you. Hare Krishna.